Norman, I'm really happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
Wonderful. Norman, we've got so much to cover and so little time because your career has spanned 3 decades, numerous appearances in 49 operas, performing with over 30 opera groups in Canada, United States, Europe, and South America. Your co-stars have been some of opera's other great talents, such as Pavarotti, Placido Domingo, Birgit Nilsson, and Renata Scotto. You became a specialist in Verdi and won critical acclaim for your role as Falstaff. But let's start at the beginning of this great journey. Where were you born, and when did you know you wanted to be an opera singer?
Well, I was born in a place called Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, which is central west. I guess I just say 500 miles above Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I started singing basically very young. I was fortunate enough to belong to clubs that put on Saturday evening parties where the young people came together, and we always were doing shows. So I started singing there, and frankly, my leaning towards the opera field was nil, because I wanted to sound like all the pop singers, etc., etc. But the more I kept on trying to sing like a pop singer, the more I recognized that my voice sounded more like opera. So eventually I took it as a sign that I was going to be an opera singer. And that's where it started, and I went on actually listening to somebody talk about a scholarship that you could get at a place called the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. That at the time was the only scholarship school in America. Right now, the other school, I forgot.
Well, that's
Juilliard.
all right. Mm-hmm.
Juilliard has started that also. But at the time that I started, I went to the only one that had it.
Now, how old were you when you made your professional debut with the Canadian Opera Company? Do you recall that? Just approximately.
I was in my 20s, yeah.
And tell us about your performance as Marcello in La Bohème with that company.
Well,
just briefly,
I didn't
how
know
you felt.
that. Well, that was the first opera that I ever did. It was not with the Canadian Opera Company. Actually, it was with the Toronto Opera Company. Later on, it was changed to the Canadian Opera Company,
Okay.
and Geiger Terrell was there, and that was years and years ago. And I had my first opportunity to sing opera, and first opportunity to do a real professional opera, and that was very interesting. I think I received $175 a week for that.
But the excitement of that must have been overpowering.
Yeah, well, it certainly was, yeah.
Now, how soon after that were you contacted by the Opera House in Essen, Germany?
Well, I wasn't contacted. Actually, I went over to Europe. I had won the Fisher Award from the Metropolitan Opera. From all over America. I had won the New York area, etc., and the international. And it was time to make my move to go to Europe. And contrary to many other opera singers, I had very little, if any, repertoire. And I went to Europe, and that was in 1959, I think it was. And who did I meet in Europe but another person who wanted to sing, and that was Martina Arroyo, who, of course, we became fast friends.
That is exciting. Now, you went on to join the Deutsche Opera am Rhein.
Yeah, that
I'm
was
sure I'm not pronouncing
well, Deutsche
that right.
Opera am Rhein is because it was affiliated with the Duisburg as well as the Dusseldorf Opera. But I was engaged in the Dusseldorf Opera, and we sang in both Duisburg and Dusseldorf.
You then made your debut at the Met. According to your bio and information that I've gotten, and if the dates are wrong, just tell me, but you made your debut at the Met in 1962, La Scala in 1969. And tell us what life was like for a young talent who was being acclaimed in the opera world, especially in Europe and other great places.
I was very fortunate because I had gone over, and I believe, if I recall correctly, I was 28 years old or something like that. And Mr. Bing came to Dusseldorf, in fact, and wanted to hear what I sounded like again. And at that time, I must admit that I went to the Metropolitan Opera auditions, and my thought process at the time was that I was going to be a Helden baritone, one that sings Wagner. And when I went over to Europe, they said to me, "No, you're a character baritone." So I knew I was a character, but a character baritone I didn't understand. But that was the dramatic baritone roles. And later on, as I was singing in these roles, an Italian manager said to me, "You know, actually, you have what's called a true Verdian baritone voice. The quality is very dark, and that's the component for being a Verdi baritone."
Explain just a little more to my audience what is meant by that and what is required to become an outstanding one as you were. It's more than voice.
Well, it's a very difficult kind of a question to answer, because basically I think that the voice itself has to be dramatic. It has to be overpowering, and I think a great deal has to do with your acting abilities. And I was very fortunate that people liked me for that specifically, and it was very nice also personally, because I had another great awakening, and that was that I always found out that when I walked on the stage for the first time, I always felt that the binoculars were being lifted and people were looking to see who was coming out then, which means that I had the audience, I captured the audience.
Yes, and also it's the acting and the presence, so the physicality, the way you look and the way you do the role. You're not just standing there like.
I love character acting, I guess, acting more than just singing. I don't like, for instance, Trovatore is a role that you sing, and there's very little acting, and that to me doesn't please me as much as a role that needs a lot of acting.
Now, Scarpia, though, that
was an acting role? Oh, yes, very much so. Yeah.
Were you a good guy or a bad guy?
I was always the bad guy. Always the bad guy. It's carried me on in life. Yes, always the bad guy.
Well, I wish I had been able to see you back then. What character did you play that was among your favorites? I know I asked you this question one time, but let's tell the audience, because you had a very specific answer for that.
Well, all the roles that I sang, of course, were always my favorite, but again, Falstaff, again, was one favorite of mine, and the reason that it was a favorite of mine was because I was practically in every scene, and also because of the acting that I had to do. It was tremendous. But you know, when I finished doing Falstaff, I was asked many times, "Are you tired now?" And I said, "No, I could do it again."
Well, I've seen photographs of you in that role, and did it take a long time to prepare prior to that? I'm not just talking about the singing, of course, but the makeup and the costuming was incredible in some of these roles that you played.
Yeah, well, of course, he's an old, lecherous man, and of course that does take time. Of course, I had to carry around this big belly, which was put on me. But since I came to the desert, I think I don't need that belly anymore. But anyway, that took a lot of time, and of course the hair, the wig that had to be put on, etc., and the fattening of the face, and that was done not necessarily by plastics or anything of that nature. It was done by color, and that's it's very beautiful to look at, and I'm sure that you've been at my home, and my wife Barbara did this fantastic painting,
the portrait.
Yes, of
It's
me
incredible.
as Falstaff.
Yes, yes.
And you could see how colorful it is.
It really was. Now, I'd like to read a couple more quotes. German critic said about your Falstaff that you were, quote, a Falstaff par excellence, with a powerful voice and temperament, who well earned the lion's share of the ovation that he received. In 1977, you made your American debut as Falstaff with the Baltimore Opera, where a critic said, among other things, that you convincingly portrayed the conflicting elements of the character and spoke highly of your vocal talent. You had a lot of wonderful quotes like that by many critics. Now, I've read also in some of your background material that 1979 to 1980 was a momentous time for you when you appeared with the San Francisco Opera. Tell us about that and who your fellow performers were at the time.
I don't even recall what I was doing at that time, because I did perform a few times. I don't know if that is the La Gioconda or the
Well, I have it right here in my
Yes.
notes. In 1972, you sang your first performance of Nelusco in the American premiere of Meyerbeer's L'Africaine with
Placido Domingo. And at that time,
Shirley
Shirley
Barrett.
Barrett was singing, and she was the main. She sang in that opera the soprano role instead of the mezzo role, but that was a wonderful thing. And that opera is not done that often, but when it's done, it's a standout.
Well, you also went on to play in the San Francisco Opera production of La Gioconda, which opened the season broadcasted live on national public television, as well as throughout Europe via satellite. So that was very momentous.
Yes.
And Herbert Adler honored you at that point by inviting you to star as
Barnaba in that role. Yes, and that was with Luciano Pavarotti and Renata Scotto. There's a little story involved in that, which is very nice, regarding our togetherness at Covent Garden, where we both started, and Luciano and Scotto.
You are now in real estate, and are you an independent realtor? Do you work with a particular real estate company?
Yes, I'm with Realty Executives, and I've been in real estate for some years now, and that's to keep myself very, very busy. Besides doing all the music things that I'm doing here in town, I have to keep myself busy at the grindstone, so to speak.
And of course, you still remain involved in opera.
I certainly remain
That is your
in opera.
life.
My opera, I remain in opera, and I try to do as much as I can for the Palm Springs area. I mean, the whole Coachella Valley, actually. And I have certain dreams. Unfortunately, I don't know if they'll ever come true. I've always thought maybe someday we'd have a opera company here in town, and I was working for that for some time, but I don't have enough really financial supporters to do something like that here.
Well, you never know, though. It might happen.
No,
So
it may happen.
we want to keep talking about it and sharing that with our audience. And we have so many opera buffs in the Valley, and we have people like Arlene that is working so hard to create these special events. And we have other opera groups as well. And of course, you are on the board of Opera Showcase, which I'm sure some people are familiar with and some aren't. But you are the music director for that, and perhaps you can just tell us a little more about Opera Showcase and your role as musical director.
Well, this all goes hand in hand. It's a good thing that actually Arlene is here, because Arlene started something that's the opera arts, and some people feel here in the desert that there's too much music going on, or there's too many companies involved, but actually I think it's very, very good that we all try, if possible, to work together, which I don't know if that ever will come to reality, but it would be a great thing if we all work together, because everybody has the same purpose in mind, and that's to bring arts to the to Palm Springs, or the Palm Springs area. The strange thing about what Arlene is doing and Opera Guild is doing is much different from what Showcase is doing, and many people, I spend a lot of time trying to explain that the Opera Showcase is centered on something totally different, and that is they're picking up people who are applying for participation in the Metropolitan Opera auditions, which take place in New York. And what we do is we gather together some of the winners who are having their contest in LA, and then we bring choices that we make, usually 5 singers that we make from the winners, if possible, to the desert, and we perform what's called our showcase. And this year we're going to do something else, which I think may help to further our name. December the 29th, if people want to come, we're going to have Opera Showcase winners from Los Angeles, nice fresh singers who will be coming to do a free concert again at the wonderful library in Rancho Mirage. And I think that's going to be good, because the Rancho Mirage Library is certainly a wonderful vehicle for presenting music.
Well, it is, and thank goodness for the Rancho Mirage Library. And but could you explain a little bit what you do as music director for the showcase when these students come? You work with them, do you? Not the students, but the participants.
Well, basically,
you work with them.
Basically, I have to tell you something. It's very funny. There's a lot of confusion involved. I'm actually considered to be the artistic director, and I think
I'm sorry, I misspoke.
It doesn't matter.
Yes.
I was called also music director,
Okay.
but artistic director is much better, because artistic director doesn't mean it means that I'm not necessarily looking after the music. We get a pianist and a director. Last year we had Lotfi Mansouri, and this year we have another director and a new pianist again, who will be coming to do our production of Showcase. And basically my job is to try, and then I have people assisting me on the board. We go to Los Angeles, we listen to the singers, and basically we try to pick out the best singers we can. Sometimes, of course, it's not always easy to pick out 4 of the best singers, because everybody has a variety of opinions. And then we present it at the Annenberg Theater, and it'll be presented this year earlier in December. But we hope that we have good choices, and one of the big jobs that I have is to make sure that we have a good program which people will like, and not a program that's necessarily so arty that people won't like.
Well, it's a wonderful program. It will continue to be a wonderful program, and I look forward to the new season. And this is the Jacqueline Bachar Show. We've been talking to Norman Mittelman.